Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. An online operation linked to China targets Liberal leader Mark Carney, attacking his experience and credentials. Plus, a 31-year-old man arrested after an incident forcing the lockdown of Parliament Hill Saturday. And it's Green Shirt Day, also known as the Logan Boulet effect, honoring the late Humboldt Bronco hockey player who saved 6 lives by signing his organ donor card.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks so much for joining us. Federal security officials are reporting that an online information operation linked to China has targeted Liberal leader Mark Carney. Officials with the Government Security and Intelligence Threats to Elections Task Force says this information was spread on the social media platform WeChat to amplify Carney's stance on the United States and target his experience and credentials.
The site task force assesses that the foreign state-backed information operation was intended to influence Canadian Chinese communities and look to mold perceptions about the candidate. The campaign received high levels of user engagement and views, between 85,000 and 130,000 interactions, and an estimate of 1 to 3 million views. WeChat developer Tencent reports that the platform itself has over 1.3 billion monthly active users, but has not disclosed how many of those users live overseas. The activity saw large spikes of what is believed to be coordinated inauthentic behavior on March 10th and 25th, 2025.
The task force says Carney was informed about this development on Sunday. The news comes as Carney is in BC meeting with Premier David Eby. Before that meeting, Carney made a major environmental announcement.
I'm announcing that a new Liberal government will move forward with 10 new national parks and marine conservation areas, along with creating 15 new national urban parks across Canada. At the same time, we will make national parks and historic sites free for all Canadians this upcoming summer. I know when I was growing up in Edmonton, Jasper National Park, Canada's crown jewel, in my opinion. I know we'll get some debate from behind me, maybe in front of me as well, but my crown jewel, Canada's crown jewel, Jasper National Park, was almost like a second home, and it's certainly where I made lasting memories. But creating new parks and making all our parks more accessible will help ensure that every Canadian will be able to experience the beauty of our great nation, just as I did.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre wrapped up a campaign sweep of the West Coast. He stopped in Terrace, BC earlier today, promising measures to help seniors.
We've proposed to delay by 2 years the time when seniors must withdraw their savings from their RSP and be taxed on it. This 2-year delay will save many seniors from being forced to crystallize losses they're experiencing on the stock market today. We know that seniors should not pay the price for Donald Trump's economic vandalism over the last several days, and that is why we will allow our seniors to keep their money invested until they regain their lost amounts. We've also announced that we will allow seniors who choose to work to earn up to $34,000 tax-free. That's $10,000 more than right now.
Poilievre will be flying into Edmonton for an evening rally in Nisku. Meanwhile, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh has announced a multi-billion-dollar plan to build 3 million affordable homes over the next 5 years. Speaking at a campaign stop Saturday morning in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, Singh promised to ensure all Canadians have a family doctor by 2030.
I believe that everyone in our country should be able to have a family doctor. I think that is a fundamental thing we need in our healthcare system. The fact that there are so many physicians in our country that simply can't see patients because they couldn't find a residency spot is outrageous. We have to fix that. Our plan is to open up 1,000 more residency spots across this country so we can actually get those physicians qualified in our country. I don't see a province that wouldn't want to increase the number of physicians in the province. I don't see a
A 31-year-old man has been charged after an incident that forced the lockdown of Parliament Hill on Saturday. Ottawa police say a man entered East Block in downtown Ottawa just after 2:30 p.m. and started making threats to those inside. They say officers managed to isolate the man in a security screening area while police evacuated the building before he surrendered peacefully after hours of negotiations. He was charged with public mischief and uttering threats to cause property damage, among others. The U.S. stock market spiked upward briefly today over a report that top White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett said the president was considering a 90-day pause on tariffs. Despite the alleged remark circulating on social media, no one could pinpoint where it came from, even as the market flashed from red to green. A short while later, they retreated again and steeped to losses across Bay and Wall Streets. Haskett was asked by Fox News earlier today about a potential pause, but was non-committal in his reply, and a White House account on X later called the reports of Trump considering a tariff pause fake news. Alberta's agriculture minister is off to Washington, D.C. to make the case for North American free trade. R.J. Sigurdsson says in a statement that although the April 2nd tariffs announcement from the Trump administration was a positive one for Alberta and Canada for the time being, he says uncertainty remains. He says our relationship with the U.S. needs to be, in his words, re-strengthened. Sigurdsson leaves Monday, and his itinerary includes meeting with the National Potato Council, the American Soybean Association, the American Farm Bureau, and the North American Meat Institute. Alberta's UCP government has announced major funding changes it says will shorten surgical wait lists. The government is moving away from the global funding model where a huge lump sum of funding is given to hospitals to pay for surgeries to what's called an activity-based funding model. Hospitals would receive funding based on the services they deliver, and if chartered surgical facilities could do more surgeries more efficiently, they would receive more funding as well.
We'll be looking forward to piloting this funding approach and doing careful analysis in creating our recommendations for the minister. We will work with the health service delivery providers, the new AHS, Covenant Health, and others to ensure that access remains a priority in all settings, including rural sites. It is clear we need a new approach to manage costs in delivering health care while ensuring that Albertans receive the care they expect and the care they deserve. Introducing patient-focused funding into the Alberta healthcare system will bring greater transparency, greater accountability, while providing incentive to provide more care in better places.
The group Friends of Medicare has already given the plan a thumbs down, saying it's just the UCP government moving forward with its plan to use public money to accelerate healthcare privatization. As we're beginning to see election signs pop on private property, it turns out not everyone's all that thrilled by their presence. Liberal candidate for Lethbridge, Chris Spearman, says he's very disappointed after multiple election signs under his name were defaced and vandalized in Coaldale, and many more were stolen. Various signs along Coaldale streets were found spray painted with swastikas and obscenities. Chris expressed his thoughts on social media saying, quote, "It's upsetting, not just for me, but for what it says about the tone of our politics." He adds, while he understands those who may be angry, the answer isn't destruction, but to use your voice at the ballot box instead. He has notified BCN that 5 signs have been vandalized and 25 were stolen as of Monday. He has submitted a complaint with the RCMP, who are now investigating the case. Defacing and tampering with election signs is punishable under the Criminal Code of Canada under the charge of mischief. Chris Spearman officially launched his campaign as Liberal candidate for the Lethbridge riding on a Saturday. A first-of-its-kind program in North America is launching in Lethbridge. The Police Service and Wounded Warriors Canada has launched the Down Regulator Skills Training Program. Deputy Chief Gerald Grobmeyer says the aim is to empower police officers and other first responders who regularly face threats of death or violence with practical interventions to reduce the risk of traumatic injury.
This innovative program focuses on simple, practical interventions that officers can use not only after high-stress call, but during the event itself, as long as it's safe to do so. These grounding techniques help officers stay present in the moment and reduce the risk of injury after a traumatic event. At the heart of the program is the BETTER model, which stands for body, emotions, thoughts, and relationships. It doesn't necessarily have to happen to them, but if they're exposed to it, and even if there's a threat of it, so it doesn't even have to happen, there could be a threat of that as well that could lead to trauma. So these tools will help our police officers be able to stay in the game longer and be able to go to the next call or stay in that call longer. So it is about helping them personally, but it also helps them do their job better as well.
He says it's estimated that over half of civilians will experience at least one potentially traumatic event in their lifetime. In contrast, police officers are exposed to approximately 3 to 5 traumatic events every 6 months. That means officers may experience up to 200% more trauma than the average person. People in Saskatchewan, across Canada, and even in the United States paid tribute on Sunday to the 16 players and staff who died in the 2018 Humboldt Broncos bus crash. The Broncos were on their way to a playoff game in Nipawin on April 6th of 2018 when their bus was hit by a semi that ran through a stop sign. Among those speaking out on Sunday was Liberal leader Mark Carney, who said hockey has always brought Canadians together, but it's how we show up for one another in grief and in strength that defines who we are. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre also posted a tribute on social media saying he was thinking of the families affected. And with that in mind, today is Green Shirt Day in Lethbridge, a day to wear the color that represents the Broncos, but now represents organ and tissue donation in Canada. Here in Lethbridge, Logan Boulet of the Broncos, who passed away following that tragic collision, inspired this noble initiative by donating his organs to save the lives of 6 people. Recently, the city of Lethbridge declared April 7th as Green Shirt Day. Toby Boulet, Logan's father, represents this donor movement.
It's hard to believe that 7 years has slipped by since Logan passed and the Humboldt Bronco tragedy happened. As far as organ donor registrations has happened, the original number of 150,000 people was only from 6 provinces. 4 didn't even have online registration. Now all provinces have online registration, so the accuracy of the counting is much better. It's kind of been pegged around 400,000 now. It's hard to say why everyone's registering at this stage at this time. There's lots of registrations around Green Shirt Day, but at the same time, people register year long. We get messages, people stop us at Safeway, they stop us all over the place. I just got my donor card, I just got my driver's license. But the big thing is that there's about 400,000 people have registered that have been inspired by Logan's story. And each registration, somebody tells something, they tell 3 or 4 people. So that makes 1.6 million Canadians have been told about the Logan Boulet effect and probably will register. And that, to us, keeps us moving forward within this campaign. It makes us feel proud. I'm sure it makes Logan feel proud of us.
According to Stats Canada, less than 25% of people living in Canada are registered donors, yet more are needed. In sports, the Lethbridge Hurricanes have moved on to the second round of the WHL playoffs after beating the Brandon Wheat Kings in 5 games. The Hurricanes jump-started the playoffs to a 3-0 series lead after Brandon avoided a sweep by taking game 4 6-4. The Canes unleashed 53 shots in Game 5 and Lethbridge winning the game 5-2, eliminating the Wheat Kings. Lethbridge will move on to play in the second round for the first time since 2018, and they will do so against the third-place Calgary Hitmen in the Eastern Conference semifinals. Games 1 and 2 begin on Thursday and Saturday in Calgary, while Lethbridge will host Games 3 and 4 on April 15th and 16th at the visitlethbridge.com arena. Good luck to our Hurricanes, of course. And while we're on the topic of hockey, history was made Sunday as Washington Capitals captain Alex Ovechkin scored his 895th goal of his career to become the NHL's all-time goals leader, surpassing Wayne Gretzky's record of 894 goals. Ovechkin passed the record during a game against the New York Islanders at UBS Arena in Elmont, New York. Following the goal, a ceremony was held in honor of his accomplishment, once thought by many to be impossible to break. The 39-year-old Russian forward has played each year with the Capitals since being drafted first overall in 2004, winning a Stanley Cup in 2018. Here is the Associated Press, where fans in Moscow celebrated the new record.
Классно, классно. Я рад очень, просто рад за нашего соотечественника. Саня, молодец. Легенда номер один. Вот он сейчас в мире номер один по хоккею, по забитым шайбам.
Lots of excitement there. Also in sports, Canada's Brad Jacobs crushed China 11-2 to win bronze at the BKT World's Men's Curling Championship. Jacobs, Mark Kennedy, Brett Gallant, and Ben Herbert were determined to play hard even though it was a third-place game.
We wanted to win. You know, we wanted to come out of this thing strong, hold our heads high, get ourselves on the podium, do it for ourselves, do it for the fans. And we were able to do that today. So I'm really proud of us. You know, that's our last, I said it in the last two interviews, that was our last team game this season, the four of us, because our front end's not going to make it to the Players' Championship. We've got a couple spares coming in. So we wanted to end this season with the four of us on a winning note. We were able to do that, and it feels great.
And with the World's Men's Curling Championships sweeping their way to a wrap up over the weekend in Moose Jaw, we go to a different kind of sweeping. The city of Lethbridge is kicking off its annual street sweeping program and wants residents to be aware of all posted signage during the season. Crews will tackle the city's main roads throughout the night and residential streets during the day beginning this week. Much of the sand that's used on our winter roads will be collected, screened, and recycled for use next winter.
This year we are beginning on the north side of Lethbridge, Senator Buchanan, and then from there we'll kind of try to avoid the garbage cart pickup, so our schedule is adjusted accordingly just because it's cumbersome to maneuver around all the carts when they are out, so there's a lot of dirt and dust on the ground. This winter was quite challenging for streets and roads operation. We had to apply a lot of sand salt, so that is what we are coming now to pick up. It is to protect the environment, that this stuff doesn't end up in the storms water system, and also to create safety for pedestrians, cars, bike riders, everybody that travels along the roads.
Parking enforcement will be in place on areas that are scheduled for sweeping. To know more about what areas are scheduled, when residents can look to City of Lethbridge website for more information. Always a telltale sign of spring when you see those street sweepers heading down your block. So another sign is this week's forecast, and that is right after the break.
The 7-day forecast for today has us with a high of 19 with a low of 3 and nice partly cloudy skies. Tomorrow is going to have a high of 12 with partly cloudy skies and a low of 3. Wednesday is going to have a high of 14 with sunny skies. Thursday is going to have sunny skies as well with a high of 17. And same thing for Friday with those sunny skies and a high of 18. Saturday is also going to have a high of 18 but with partly cloudy skies. And Sunday has a 60% chance of showers with a high of 12. Looking at today's almanac, the average high for this time of year is 12 degrees, with the low being -2. The record high was set back in 2005 today, with a high of 24, and the record low was set back in 1923 with -18. The sun rose at 6:56 a.m. today and will set at 8:12 p.m. Looking at the national forecast, both Vancouver and Victoria share chances of showers, with Vancouver having a high of 10 and Victoria having a high of 11. Edmonton also has chances of showers with a high of 10, and Calgary has some partly cloudy skies with a high of 11. On to the prairies now. Saskatoon and Regina have partly cloudy skies, with Saskatoon having a high of 7 and Regina a high of 11. Winnipeg will have nice sunny skies and a high of 7. On to central Canada. We are getting a lot of snow at these parts, with Toronto getting a high of -1, Ottawa getting a high of -3, and Montreal getting a high of 1. all those cities have a 60% chance of snow. On to the East Coast now. Fredericton, Halifax, Charlottetown, and St. John's all have chances of snow, with Fredericton having a high of 2, Halifax and Charlottetown having highs of 1, and St. John's having a 60% chance of snow, also with a high of 1.
New reports from the Bank of Canada show trade uncertainty is taking its toll on both business and consumer confidence. The central bank's Business Outlook survey says 32% of firms are now planning with the assumption that a recession will happen over the coming year in Canada. That's up from 15% over the past 2 quarters. Meantime, the Canadian Survey of Consumer Expectations says concerns about job security have increased because of the trade conflict. Earlier today, Canadian and U.S. stocks were left swinging following a manic morning as Wall Street tossed around a false rumor about President Donald Trump's plan for his trade war. A White House account on X said a rumor circulating that Trump was considering a 90-day pause on his tariffs was, quote, fake news. Wall Street had catapulted from an early drop that had dragged it 20% below its record to a sudden rise only to revert to losses. So with that in mind, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 334 points on the day to finish at 22,859. The Dow was down 249 points to 37,965. The S&P 500 was down 11 points to 5,062, and the Nasdaq was up 15 points to 15,603. West Texas Intermediate oil was down $1.05 to $60.93 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 20 cents to $3.62 US. Gold was down $54.43 to $29.8267 US an ounce. Silver was up 51 cents to $30.08 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.57 per bushel. Barley is at $6.70. Canola is at $14.10, and corn is at $7.98 per bushel. Live cattle were down $3.70 to $198.92. Feeder cattle were down $1.60 to $277.82, and lean hogs were up 42 cents to $87.80. And the Canadian dollar was up over the past 24 hours and currently sits at 70.20 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, federal security officials are reporting that an online information operation linked to China has targeted Liberal leader Mark Carney. Officials with the Government Security and Intelligence Threats to Elections Task Force says this information was spread on the social media platform WeChat to amplify Carney's stance on the United States and target his experience and credentials. The task force says Carney was informed about this development on Sunday. The news came as Carney was in a BC meeting with Premier David Eby. Coming up next, foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari updates us on U.S. tariffs, Israel, protests, Russia, and so much more. Also, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also check out our website or our YouTube page anytime to see more of our stories, our interviews. Well, worldwide stocks were down, then up, and then down again since President Donald Trump implemented his across-the-board reciprocal tariffs on 60 countries. Now the White House phone won't stop ringing from world leaders, and we've got protests happening across the states. Here to chat about it all is foreign affairs correspondent Lisa Daftari of the Foreign Desk, joining me from Los Angeles. Lisa, hello.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Okay, so Lisa, U.S. stocks are swinging Monday following a manic morning where indexes plunged, soared, and then sank again as Wall Street tossed around a false rumor about President Donald Trump's plan for his trade war. I had heard that he was putting a 90-day pause on all tariffs, but then it ended up not being true. So was that the rumor that we're talking about, Lisa?
Yeah, so everyone woke up expecting and then seeing the proof in the pudding, in the sense that we're going to have a Bloody Monday, Black Monday, so many names to call it, that in reaction to the tariffs, we were going to see plunging numbers around the world, but obviously everyone focused on the American Stock Exchange. That, and then, with these rumors swirling around, it went up and down and up and down. And again, as you pointed out, this was a rumor about a 90-day pause that has been suggested to Donald Trump, saying, wait a minute, yes, in theory, perhaps your idea, and you can go back to your idea, but let's take a pause so that we don't just create utter chaos across the economic, global community. That's exactly what's happening. But Jeanette, the other side effect of all of this is that up and down adds to the lack of confidence or the lack of certainty which markets are based on. And that really is the unfortunate part here. Look, there are individuals who say, just hang in there. I spoke to somebody who is keeping up with a lot of the, in the financial world, the banking world, what they're talking about. And he cited one of these reports saying that, just hang in there. For the people who actually have, thick skin, they're out on a shopping spree because everything's on sale, right? So yeah, get out there, buy what you can, hold on for the long haul. And as my husband always tries to calm me down when I see these numbers going down on our portfolios, he says, you don't lose money until you sell. So if we're going to hang on, if we're going to have faith that this will all eventually work out, then those individuals are hanging on with patience, with confidence that this will eventually pan out the way that we want it.
Your husband sounds exactly like my husband. It's like, don't panic sell. It's the people that panic sell that lose their money. Yeah, it's so interesting. Now, Lisa, speaking of the trade war and tariffs, over 50 of the 60 countries hit with these duties have now reached out to the White House to negotiate with the president. So do you think that he's willing to negotiate with some of them, or is he playing hardball here?
No, it depends on the country, but I think, look, the White House is looking at this as a win. The fact that these countries, because of these tariffs, are now coming back and saying, let's have a conversation is partially a win, because that's what we want to do. We want to be like, hey, wait a minute, we're blowing the whistle. We want to have a conversation. This needs to be corrected. Now with China, I think just minutes before you and I went on air, we saw that Donald Trump said something like, threatening them, doubling down, as they say, threatening them with 50% tariffs if they don't, do X, Y, and Z. Look, we have a major issue with China. We know that. And that is probably the beast that will be most difficult to tame or to get concessions from. And that's something that we knew going in. The other countries, I think that if I were Donald Trump, and I'm no economic expert, but if I were Donald Trump, I would take those meetings right away. I would take those calls right away, because you want to fix as much as, or iron out as much as you can, as quickly as you can, to bring some normalcy and to set some examples. And I know Bibi Netanyahu is at the White House today, where they will also be talking about tariffs. That may be the first example of an ironed out situation where there's reciprocity and that it's an even or equal playing field, and other countries will follow suit.
Yeah, you mentioned Netanyahu. I'll get to that in a second here, but do you think that, does this mean that Trump maybe knows what he's doing and he is running the country like a business after all? Sort of that art of the deal thing that we were talking about before.
Yeah, let's bring in our husbands' energies here, where everyone's upset, everyone's kind of looking at the numbers and taking it day by day. But look, the bottom line is, even when Donald Trump was thinking about running for office, he wasn't even a candidate. He would go on the news shows, the morning shows, the cable news shows, and say, we're being taken advantage of. The acronym to organizations we shouldn't be paying into. It's not a charity. We shouldn't be, giving everything at a discount to other countries and then paying a premium. He talks about how when you go to other countries, you don't see American cars on the road, but when you come to the United States, there's mostly foreign cars on the road. Yes. You can argue it's because we don't have the best cars, but we'll leave that argument for another day. What we're talking about here is two different things. Number one, day by day, obviously in the short and medium perhaps terms, there will be a lot of loss. There will be a lot of global chaos in terms of the markets. Now the question then becomes, number two, will this work? And I know that there are a lot of opinions swirling around on Twitter with experts. If you watch Bloomberg, if you watch CNBC, if you watch Fox Business, all the business news platforms, there are varying opinions on this. Many people believe that tariffs never work, and some people believe, this in the long term may work. And it really depends on how we can have those conversations and how these countries will respond. We know, the Europeans, I think, are coming up with some sort of response, and we can talk about that later. But I think it really depends on how the chips fall, how people react, and if they really look at the situation in terms of long-term prosperity for all. Will they look at it that way, or will they look at this, orange Cheeto man as being a bully who's trying to strong arm everyone? It really does depend on how these other countries react.
Oh boy. And one of those countries reacting, of course, we mentioned Israel. So Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will meet with Donald Trump at the White House today, Monday. And Lisa, there's a lot going on here. It's a very critical meeting that could include discussions about Gaza hostages, Iran, and tariff relief, right?
Right. There's a lot to talk about. And in the midst of, the United States and Israel under a Donald Trump presidency being lock and step in terms of getting the hostages back, the United States helping with that, the negotiations, really the United States supporting Israel, much more in a more transparent and full-hearted way, than we saw with the Biden administration, giving them the weapons that they need to finish off this war. And at the same time, we saw Bibi Netanyahu come out in the midst of all this tariff chaos and say, you know what? Let's start the conversation with us. We're going to remove all the tariffs, and we want to begin that conversation. So I think this is a pivotal meeting today in the White House. Bibi Netanyahu, again, may be the textbook case for reciprocity and working together with the United States. Of course, Israel and the United States have a very special relationship, particularly Bibi and Trump have a very, they have a united approach to, peace, prosperity, the future and security of the Middle East. And now you can add tariffs to the list. So I think it'll be a very, very important meeting. And also, I think there will be talk about the future of dealing with the Islamic regime in Iran and how they're going to do that together. As we know, there has been a lot of back and forth between Donald Trump inviting the mullahs, the regime in Iran, to the negotiating table to strike another nuclear deal. The mullahs said no. And Donald Trump made it very clear that there will be consequences if you don't accept our invitation to start talks again. We're almost fortunate that they didn't accept the invitation, because talks mean nothing, negotiations mean nothing, nuclear deals mean nothing to this regime. I don't think the Trump administration would have gotten a decent deal anyway. And I think that's part of the diplomacy that Donald Trump was playing. So it was a smart move in terms of now pivoting to Plan B. And we'll see how the Israelis and Donald Trump's administration will work together to, again, move to the second and third phases of this war.
Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, back on the home front, or your home front, I guess, protesters worldwide really are rallying against Trump and Elon Musk, and particularly across all 50 states. So at state capitals, federal buildings, congressional offices, Social Security headquarters, city halls, all throughout the entire country. So they're calling it the hands-off protest to end what they're calling the billionaire power grab. Lisa, what can you tell us about this?
It's so funny that they're using the tagline "hands off" when the left is exactly hands on. That is the type of government that they've always pushed for. Look, I tweeted that protests are the new pickleball. It seems like everyone is just out there protesting the next thing, and really misguided in a lot of ways. Just with the, Elon Musk's Department of Government Accountability, and how efficiency, and how, it's saving taxpayers a ton of money, and now how they're underscoring so much waste and fraud, and people are out on the streets actually protesting this. Look, I understand the argument to say don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. There are certain organizations that have to come under, evaluation again, and if they are worthy, they should be given funding. Fine. That's an argument to make, but to be out on the streets and being upset about everything, I mean, from A to Z, upset with the administration, it just shows that this is Trump derangement syndrome, and it's nothing more than that. If you have an actual case, if you think, what does hands off mean? What do you want this government to do? We want the Trump administration to say hands off. That means continue wasting billions of dollars. Sure. Okay, who's benefiting other than the fraudsters that are, getting the checks and getting the funding and really, again, taxpayer money. So, it really, I wish they would take a second to just put things into perspective and understand what they're doing, but they don't. This is really low level protests.
We got to talk a little bit about Russia here and Ukraine. So, after a 2-day gathering of NATO ministers in Brussels, it looks like Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the U.S. is losing patience with Russia. And it sounds like the U.S. is questioning whether Russia is serious about striking a peace deal with Ukraine. So, what are your thoughts, Lisa?
Yeah, I'm glad Marco Rubio stepped up, and I think he's a very competent Secretary of State. He understands the nuances here, and he's calling, Putin out. He says, you're basically playing out the clock. We're not going to just continue having talks about talks, and we need to see some sort of action. And this is in response to additional strikes on Ukraine from Russia over the last couple of days. And Marco Rubio, he said, we're going to find out within days or weeks, not months, if this is going to continue going forward. So I do think they're going to give Putin some sort of deadline, some sort of ultimatum to get things going on these talks. We had, a lot of optimism from the Trump administration regarding some sort of ceasefire, some sort of cooperation by Russia. The Ukrainians have to, cooperate because I think, they're not the ones in a position of power at this moment. And the United States wants, Ukraine to just sit down and say, yes, sir. Well, then we need to get Russia to the table too. And I think that level of optimism kind of went quicker than we could get Putin to agree. So now Marco Rubio is calling him out and saying, you know what, enough is enough. Let's see what you got. If you're serious about this, then you got to step up.
Lisa, it looks like we have almost about a minute left here, but we did talk a little bit about Israel and Gaza before, but it looks like Hamas has revised its casualty figures from the Gaza war, revealing that 72% of those killed were males aged 13 to 55, and the numbers actually contradict their earlier claims that most of them were women and children with, 13 years of age is still a child, obviously. But what do you know about this, Lisa?
Yeah, look, this is something that many of us who have been following this war and covering the Middle East and covering terror organizations knew. This is their handbook, this is their playbook. All these mainstream media outlets, all these NGOs, even the White House under the Biden administration was quoting the Gaza Ministry of Health with their death toll numbers without really qualifying what that number was. And we knew that it was inflated. We knew that it was misconstrued and it wasn't mostly women and children the way that they wanted the world to believe. But you know what, Jeanette? Thank you for covering this because most mainstream media outlets won't go back and correct themselves. They won't go back and say this is the case. But what happened? Instead, you got a whole generation of TikTokers, college students, people on social media, people on college campuses, average people protesting on the streets of London and New York and Los Angeles and other places, Toronto, Montreal being some of the worst. And what happened? Those people are not going to get off the streets. They're not going to get educated. They don't even care about the facts. They just have a feeling, and that feeling is anti-Semitism. That feeling is Jew hatred, and it was fueled and propelled by these false and fake numbers, by doctored reports. Now, I want to stop for a moment and say, is there a death toll? Absolutely. Is there death and devastation? Absolutely. Are there people who actually are bloodied and have lost limbs? Absolutely. But we do know that there is a lot of propaganda as well. And I want to remind people that we are dealing with a terrorist organization, and then we are quoting that same terrorist organization in our news reports. We're quoting them at the UN. We're quoting them wherever we want to make a case. But the real advocacy for the Palestinian people would be to get rid of Hamas as their leading government. To really want a future for them, you have to rid them of terrorism. You have to have mothers want life, not death for their children, not want martyrdom for their children. And that's the way forward. And you know what? I think thank you so much for making a correction on this and really reporting on the fact that this number was corrected. And I hope others follow suit as well.
Lisa Daftari of the Foreign Desk, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Every so often we hear of cities that experience emergency situations of one kind or another, be it hurricanes, flooding, earthquakes, fires, etc. So obviously municipalities need to be prepared to respond to these ahead of time. So, how is Lethbridge prepared for an emergency? Well, today's guest is going to share how you can be part of the answer. Jamie Anderson is the Emergency Planning Administrator with the City of Lethbridge. Welcome, Jamie. Great to have you with me today.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to talk emergency social services.
Okay, well, it's good that you're excited to talk about emergencies. It means that you are prepared and you're also passionate about it. So, Jamie, our city has something called the Emergency Social Services Team, or ESS for short, right? So, can you maybe give us a brief overview of what this team is about?
Yeah, you betcha. So the Emergency Social Services team fits within the broader emergency management portfolio. So responding to disasters, like you mentioned earlier, but the Emergency Social Services team specifically focuses on the people. So evacuees, how are we providing the basic essentials that people would need in a time of disaster to get back and reestablish themselves as quickly as possible to their day-to-day lives.
Okay, so you are looking for local volunteers who have already a certain amount of skills, I guess, that they can offer to the city in an emergency situation. But I guess volunteers also need to go through a certain amount of training. So, what kind of training needs to be completed by these volunteers?
Yeah, you betcha. So for prerequisites, we kind of like to say, if you have that willingness to learn and the passion to help other people, that's the prerequisite. We have lots of volunteers who do come with predetermined skill sets and careers that are very focused, but we provide all of the training that would be needed in order to respond in an emergency social services capacity. So we do monthly micro learns, so 1 hour once a month. And we also do tabletop exercises and integration into the broader planning. So we get to do exercises with the emergency management team when they do their full scale exercises. But we do run the program based on incident command system, which is the command system that is used for emergencies in the province of Alberta. So training in ICS, or incident command system, is a requirement, and we provide that as well.
Okay, what kind of time commitment are we looking at for volunteers?
Yeah, so typically speaking, we look at about 12 hours annually. So that accommodates the 1 hour micro learns once a month. There are other times when additional time might be committed, and that could be in a response event. So if we do have something happening in the city, that would mean more time. And we have the ICS training to get people up and running. And that is an on your own time training, or we offer it in person. Um, and that is about a 2 day commitment. So to get up and running, it's about 2 days to get all the knowledge, but then a monthly micro learn, so 1 hour once.
Oh, I bet that's an intense couple of days there. Pack it all in. I understand. Yeah, I understand, Jamie, that you need people who can maybe assist individuals and families who have been displaced from their homes to find shelter and accommodation. What kind of occupations or experience would someone need to fill this role?
Absolutely. So that is kind of our primary focus. Again, if someone has been displaced from their homes, how are we making sure that they have what they need in that basic requirement? So that could be shelter, it could be food, it could be clothing if that's required, or it could be specialized services. We build the program, and then we train people to operate within that program. So there really isn't any specialized skill set that you need when you come to the table. It's just that willingness to help and that willingness to learn. Um, More and more, we see that emergency social services is a community response. And so, in a time of event in other communities, we have this outpouring of community members that want to support their neighbors. And we wanted to take a proactive approach to that and say, we would like to have people trained so that they're feeling comfortable when they come to the table if they do want to help their neighbors in that time of event.
Yeah, and I guess in emergencies, people need food, clothing. So would you be looking for people with professional experience, maybe in food prep necessarily?
No, not necessarily. So the way that we have structured the program is based on agreements and MOUs that we have with industry specialists throughout the city. So really, we're the facilitators. We're getting the information from evacuees to say what is the service that you need, or what are the requirements that you need in order to reestablish yourself to that baseline, or to get you through this event. And so we connect people to those resources, and we provide registration for them so that they are able to access certain resources, but we don't need to be the specialists in those resources.
Okay, interesting. I guess with that said, usually, if disasters do take place, there can be a very real impact or a toll on people's emotional health. So would it maybe make sense to have an emotional and psychological support available to people who might be experiencing trauma or distress? So would you necessarily be looking for trained counselors or mental health professionals?
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest things that we see is, this is obviously going to be the worst day of someone's life when they're coming to meet us. So we really look at taking an empathetic approach, and making sure that we're welcoming. But again, we don't need to be the experts, but we need to know the experts to get people connected with them. So we have a strong relationship with a number of different agencies throughout the community who do specialize in trauma supports, and specialize in that emotional and psychological wellness capacity in different specialized areas. So, be it seniors or children, or anywhere in between, we really want to connect people with the subject matter experts, while providing that warm, welcoming approach that we can offer.
That's awesome. Are there other cities using a similar approach, like having a team of trained volunteers on standby?
Yeah, absolutely. So, providing an emergency social services response is part of the overall emergency management portfolio. So, it is a requirement for municipalities. And a lot of municipalities tackle this in house. So, we do have staff members who are ESS volunteers as well, in addition to their day to day jobs. But what we see, again, as I mentioned earlier, this outpouring of community response. When something happens, be it in our community, or if we have another community evacuating um, to our area, and we saw that with Jasper when they were evacuated
Okay,
last summer, and
right,
Fort McMurray when they evacuated a few
right.
years ago.
I remember
Um,
High River as well.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, they a lot of the refugees, I guess, if you want to call them, that had to come and live at the U of L. Yeah, so that's kind of what we're talking about here, right?
yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. And when we see that, um, you know, people people have a desire to help out. They really want to make sure that, when someone is coming to our community, or when people are in a time of need, that there's this real outpouring of love and support. And that's usually where volunteers come from. So what we are trying to do is we're trying to proactively train volunteers, so that in that moment, people are feeling more comfortable, and they're feeling more successful in the systems and the processes that we have in place to support evacuees. And that will allow us um, to focus on kind of the wellness piece of it. And we're not trying to learn the documentation piece or the paperwork piece while we're helping people who are struggling.
Okay, evacuees. That was the word I was looking for. I called them refugees. The evacuees. Okay, so I know for sure Lethbridge has helped evacuees from, like, I remember Medicine Hat, was it the summer of 2013, I believe, that big flood. So Medicine Hat was affected, High River, Calgary. Has Lethbridge ever undergone a situation like this where there was maybe flooding or fires or anything in the past?
So the thing is, there could be catalyst for a response, regardless of it making that kind of large scale media impact, right? So it could be an apartment building that maybe is evacuated. It could be a senior center that's evacuated. We really The way that we are activated is through our director of emergency management. So if we hit a capacity where people can't meet the needs themselves, or where our city departments operationally cannot support the need, then we activate emergency social services, and we can support from there.
I know, exactly. And what about first aid? I would imagine that would that be part of that 2-day training?
So first aid is one of those things that we wouldn't do ourselves, but would facilitate that response. So if someone is in medical need, we defer to the experts, and we would be calling 911, or we would be supporting that way. Um, but Understanding what needs might be there or understanding where something might escalate, that's what we train in and that's what we are aware of as volunteers.
Have you personally ever had to undergo a municipal emergency
I
or help
have. I
with
have
one?
been I have been in several municipalities who have had different levels of activation. I have seen like trying to think of examples. So I've seen smaller scale activation where we have had seniors facilities who have had to evacuate and needed a place to go. Um, in that scenario, if it's a couple of hours, maybe we would open up a reception center where people can just go and get warm or cool off in the summertime and wait until the circumstances abate, I guess. There are also proactive measures, right? Again, when we have evacuees from other communities that are coming um, into our area, we could see an activation for that as well. So it doesn't even need to be a disaster, an emergency situation impacting our city specifically, but we could activate to support our neighbors as well.
Right. I would imagine that an area also where some help might be needed might look little bit more administrative, but very necessary, possibly helping reuniting family members and establishing communication between them. I can see that being kind of a scary situation, or maybe setting up a system where people can register for assistance and get questions answered about what kind of helps are available for them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that keys in on really what we focus on. So we do have a reunification program, and we have a plan in place that we would teach volunteers how to take the information and share the information in a way that is compliant with different legislation pieces on sharing of people's personal information. But we also, again, that's why it's so critical that we focus on the registration piece is how are we knowing who is within our system, who needs help, and how are we reuniting them with the people that they love or the people that might be looking for them? Because you're right, it can be very chaotic when people are evacuating um, situations like fires or floods, and they're getting out in a hurry. Maybe cell phone batteries have gone dead. How many of us remember all those key phone numbers off the top of our heads anymore? So being able to provide that reunification is really important.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the big emergency that comes to my mind is the Los Angeles fires. Nowhere close to us right now, but it really makes you think about everything that can go wrong. I mean, pets getting lost. You heard stories about that. Their pets getting lost in the shuffle. So maybe, do we have people that you're looking for that maybe have skills in those areas that want to volunteer to provide animal care?
Yeah, yeah. Companion animal programming is another area that we do have a specialized program for, and that goes anywhere from how are we keeping people with their companion animals if they're sheltered with us? How are we supporting by keeping animals if they can't be sheltered together? Or how are we retrieving animals if someone is maybe working out of town for the day and they can't get back to their homes? How are we making sure that those animals are accounted for as well? So a lot of you asked about administrative responsibilities earlier. A lot of what we do is that administrative component, taking the information and tracking it in a way that we can use it and make it functional, and then making sure that we are able to tell the story of the event after the fact. So the administrative piece is kind of the biggest piece that we work on. And again, we do all of the training for that. We'll teach people how to use the forms and how the programs work. Um, they just need to have that willingness to want to help out.
Yeah, definitely. What about donations? I would imagine a lot of times donations come in during times of crisis. Would that mean that you would need someone to help receive and assess and process and distribute those donated goods? Are you mostly working with, an organization like Red Cross or whatnot, or the other nonprofits in town?
Yeah, so we do have some agreements in place that account for donations. Like you said, sometimes if it's the middle of winter and people don't have the appropriate clothing to change out of or and need that change of clothing, we would provide that. So we do have agreements in place that would support that, but there is opportunity that we would have volunteers that would be supporting that process, right? Understanding what people need, how to get them what they need, if that's not something that's readily available, and then you never know when donations might come in that we're not expecting, right? We saw that with Fort McMurray, where there were truckloads of teddy bears that were going up. And what do we do with millions of teddy bears if that's one of the things that we have to deal with, right? So those are definitely pieces that we do have plans in place for, and that we would train for.
Yeah, that's awesome. Before I let you go here, when's the next training opportunity if any viewers are interested in joining? How should people contact you?
Yeah, you betcha. So the next training opportunity is this Thursday at noon at City Hall in the Culver Room. So that's right on the main floor, and someone at the front desk can get you pointed in the right direction. And it is welcome to join. So for this one, we are focusing on the registration form. So as a volunteer, what would that registration form look like that you're helping people through the process of? We started our training for this intake session in January, but there is opportunity to get caught up in the sessions that have already gone by. And if there are questions, please feel free to reach out. ess@lethbridge.ca is the email address.
How often do these opportunities come up to join?
Um,
Like
that is dependent.
if we air this past Thursday, say,
Yeah.
is it every 3 months, every 4 months, or once a year, twice a year?
It kind of depends on when we get that intake of people. If we had 10 people that wanted to join as a result, we would offer a 1 day kind of crash course training session that would get people up to speed again. So there are um, we respond right away and say, like, our next intake session, you will be in it. We can get people started on their online trainings, but then kind of that in-person stuff we would do probably twice a year is what it seems to be working out to be. But
Great information here for us, Jamie. Thanks so much for being with us. Appreciate all the information, and something I certainly didn't know that we had in place here in Lethbridge, but appreciate having you on today.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Jamie Anderson is the Emergency Planning Administrator with the City of Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.